So quickly moving on to the panel discussion. My first question to architect Santosh. Meanwhile, I would request everybody to share in their thoughts, like whoever wants to share their thoughts, most welcome, even though the question might be directed to one particular speaker. So to architect Santosh, so can you give us an idea on the policies and regulatory interventions facilitating decarbonization of buildings?
Yeah. Hi, Anupama. Thank you for that question. Yes. Yeah, regarding policies, I see that India's approach to building decarbonization is evolving from voluntary to performance-based accountability. I've been parallelly working on in the Middle East scenario where I see that they are. Though they are economically developed, they have not yet moved to the performance-based accountability. They are still in the voluntary efficiency. Yeah, they are still on the, I would say the voluntary efficiency side. Whereas India, we are already in the performance-based accountability when it comes to the, reporting. And we already have the very well established Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We have ECBC, and we have much work happen, which has happened in the last decade, so that we see that at the market level and at disclosure level with these institutions and with BRSR, we see there is quite a lot of aspects when it comes to policy and regulatory interventions, and we also see some incentives from some of the state governments, whereas they provide incentives for green building certifications and all. I see that when the non-financial disclosure is already being pushed towards performance based, it will indirectly penalized, and we have a CBAM, and we have more such indirect push, which is going to accelerate the aspect from regulatory intervention. So I see that it is we are almost in the good path towards it, because the good intentions uh, will only push on some amount of players. We cannot expect everyone to pick on it. Whereas when it comes to regulatory push, that is the one which is going to make a huge change. So already we are in good prospects over there. In I'm speaking in terms of consultants like us, so, people who would like this aspect to get accelerated. So business people may not, people who look at the finance, who look at the business push, they may not like this regulatory push, but it is something good. For good, it's happening for all of us.
Okay, anybody else wants to add? Pranati, Udit, or Anshu?
I think Santoshji has covered it very well.
Okay, great. So moving on to architect Anshu, my question to you. So I think when we speak about low carbon, carbon neutrality, and things like that. So what do you think? Now, right now, only isolated buildings are getting certified and all that. So what do you think should be the pathway, or the path ahead to scale it to whole cities or towns? Because isolated buildings alone will not serve the purpose.
Absolutely. When we are talking of one single building, to be, adopting low carbon strategies, we are making an impact definitely, but that impact is too low. And unless and until we scale it up, so micro to meso and then macro will be definitely what we should be aiming to. We are also planning countries going carbon neutral, and that is why looking at individual buildings will definitely not help. So I feel yes, the foremost thing remains policy enabled practices. It has to be system oriented, well coordinated, and recorded. Unless and until we keep creating new baselines or upgrading our own baselines, things won't work in the right fashions. So, creating carbon baselines and allocation of budget towards the same aim can be one of the major strategies that can move up to city level interventions. When we are talking city interventions, we also need to understand the various sources. And I would say the intensities for the carbon emissions in that particular city. So maybe one size fits all, this won't be there. It will be like, modified versions for various cities depending on their locations, and their emission targets can be created. So intensity and carbon caps can also help. Apart from that, energy systems and infrastructure available for that particular region can definitely help. Mobility and I would say the overall urban design of that particular region will be one of the major drivers towards this. So we have various countries who have adopted low carbon mechanism. They are walking, they are cycling, and they avoid driving. They have very robust public transport systems. So I think there are multiple interventions, and hence, as I mentioned, policy level intervention is one of the foremost thing that needs to be taken care of. Then, of course, materials and having typical design methodologies defined for regions can also help. People should start adopting nature-based solutions. They should also adopt urban infrastructure solutions, something like having forest lands or wetlands, also trying to curb the related carbon emission. Now we have to shift high time to digital tools, performance monitoring, and looking at all of this. I think very important is awareness, capacity building, and alignment for this particular mindset. So, I think strong governance, transparency in the data can also help for this mechanism. So, yes, it is time we have to think beyond a single building and go towards a larger scale, a city level scale, and probably look at targets we all set, but probably are we really going towards that target? Or are we moving in the reverse direction, just facing that target is also important. So I think that really needs to be looked at. Thank you for the question.
Anyone else? Their thoughts on this particular question, from moving to single buildings to entire cities? Okay, so my next question is also on cities, but this is on tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So I think when we speak about decarbonization and lowering the emissions and all of that, so are we really focusing only on tier 1 cities where there is exponential construction that is happening? So what is happening at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities? So are we taking care of these aspects there as well? So what is it? Because they are next in line, and it's not that one part of the city, one part of the country is focusing on decarbonization, and we have to compensate that. It's just happening in the reverse direction. So this question is to architect Pranati, but as I said, like, anybody can pitch in their thoughts as well.
I think that's a great question because, we've all been the entire world talks about tier one, in whether, we're all talking about evolved countries. So we always, I think it all started. So I believe that the mass movement on sustainability, we all talk about US Green Building Council, that is LEED, started the movement, and IGBC came in and so a lot of things. And we always say, developed and developing and underdeveloped, like that entire thing. Developed countries have always been in the forefront as we look at it. Similarly, our tier one cities are our developed countries, and we all said that policies are important. It's important that, development is happening. But I think it's very, very, very important to actually ensure that tier two cities also should actually go into this. So I'll give you a very interesting example again. We're working with Nasik Municipal Corporation to define their decarbonization story. So, and we're also working with a few other cities, which can't mention till it's totally out in the public, but this one is out, so I can. It's important to understand that they're also thinking about it. They want policies. People are actually ensuring. The government is ensuring. Anshul spoke about policies, and I think this is also happening at the tier two level. And it is ensuring that these places also don't face the blunt the way tier one cities are facing. it's, I was talking to a friend in Delhi today morning, and she says, you know what, I'm leaving for Goa tomorrow. I said, what happened? She says, I can't live here. I can't, my mom is actually not feeling well, and I must move tomorrow because I was going to visit her, next week, because I'm going to be in Delhi for some meetings. And I said, okay, let's catch up. He said, this is the situation, and I actually need to think. And we're all talking about it. We're talking about all our issues and what is the impact. And today, this is the situation of tier one cities. If tier two don't act today, that's exactly what's going to happen there. So I'm glad that a lot of tier two cities are actually looking at it, trying to put policies in place which will at least make sure we can reduce it by even 30-40%. And even that will make a difference. Some of the policies like the heat island effect policy, so cool roof policy that we talk about, or even ensuring an X percentage of green spaces, or making different policies that the EV policies, multiple policies that we are working on. One of the very interesting policy that we are working, of course, not directly linked when we talk about cities, not directly linked to the development, but is the LED signages. So they are saying, absolutely, you need to ensure that the night sky pollution is reduced in cities. Tier one is actually already, facing the blunt of it with the night sky pollution, which is not really good. And tier two is getting there. So how could we reduce the night sky pollution? So that's one issue that you're solving. So tier two is also looking at it. Of course, there's a lot of scope, a lot of cities. Our country is made of tier two cities and tier three. So they should be our focal points, though they are not always given the due importance that we should give. So I think it's definitely a lot of work that's happening, but there's scope for more.
Thank you for that lovely insight. Anyone else wants to add on this?
I'd just like to say that tier two cities actually are in a better position to incorporate. A lot of the things can be made right the first time directly, since they're in a stage of progress or development, and things haven't gone all that wrong. So I think they can leapfrog, unlike tier one cities who are already at the end of that stage and can't really address it the same way. So that's just my thought.
I think this should be a wake-up call to everyone to tier two cities to, not go into a very bad state and then come back. Like probably they can do something like a prevention is better than thinking later. Anyway, so my next question is to you only, Udit. So when we speak about building simulations and architectural design, so how does using building simulations and architectural design process achieve high performance buildings?
Right. So simulation shifts design decisions early. Building simulation is powerful not just because of the software, but because of when it is used. So if simulations are introduced at the concept stage during massing, orientation, facade development, they can influence the biggest carbon and energy decisions. Unlike at the end, where after detailed design, 70 to 80% of the performance outcomes are already locked in. So that's one part. The second part is traditionally architects rely on rule of thumb. So simulation replaces the assumption aspects with quantified data. So with simulation, you can test, your window wall ratio, solar heat gain, daylight autonomy, thermal comfort, wind, ventilation in very measurable ways. And so instead of saying this should work, we can say that this will reduce, the consumption or the cooling load by 18% or 20%. So it's very, very specific and tangible. And of course, it also integrates systems, not just components. So high performance buildings are not about efficient HVAC only. Simulations allow us to see how envelope decisions affect your cooling sides, or daylight affects artificial lighting load, or shading impacts versus impacts of peak loads. So each of these, even your natural ventilation, can improve the mechanical system dependence. So it becomes an integrated design conversation. And so simulation, unlike how it's typically used as just a compliance tool, simulation can and should be used as a design intelligence tool.
Okay. Anyone else on this? Different thoughts, your thoughts? I think Santosh wants to share his thoughts.
No, not really, but however, yeah, that's a nice point. Whether the project has been going for rating or not, we need to definitely include the aspect of performance evaluation through simulations. That could be a huge, cutting factor for the building to uh, understand about the loads and how they can mitigate it. So rather than considering through, I'm speaking about projects which don't go for any level of rating, whereas when they just account for those loads through thumb rules and benchmarks, and later they find it to be too high or too low. But performance evaluation, whole building energy simulation could be of great help.
Okay, thank you for that. So my next question to architect Anshul. So I think there was a lot of discussion on embodied carbon and operational carbon throughout the presentations. I think that's a very important aspect to be discussed. So what role do you think full life cycle carbon and operational carbon they're playing when thinking about carbon neutrality?
Thanks for this question because I think we had this entire session, but probably we missed on defining the right titles. So when we are talking about operational carbon, we are usually talking about the greenhouse gas emissions during the use of the building. So it is the use phase where we have the energy being consumed, we have the fuels being measured, grid electricity emissions, and all these are considered. While we are talking about full life cycle carbon, we are actually looking or accounting for all stages which are embodied carbon, including the material part of it, their raw material extraction, manufacturing, transportation, during construction, carbon emissions. Of course, adding the use stage of carbon and also end of life. Few projects or materials do not stop there, they go beyond that. They have the circularity part of it. So that is why I would say full life cycle carbon, it is having a holistic approach. And if you are trying to match up both, you will have an incorrect reading. So there is a term called carbon lock-in, and that is how we have certain definitions arising where we have emissions from materials construction, which are also happening before the building is occupied, and they cannot be offsetted later, so they become irreversible. And such things are, I think, very dangerous when it comes to carbon mapping and even sequestering. So these things need to be identified at a very early stage. Secondly, when we are talking about the decarbonization effect, we also need to understand the risk of sort of greenwashing which is coming by. So for accurate carbon accounting, if we are looking at, I think we need to understand the full life cycle carbon and not the partial part of it. Apart from that, if we are seeing the emissions, the operational carbon is during the building life, while full life cycle carbon is before, after, and during the building life cycle as well. So if this is ignored, probably we have a carbon lock-in which is irreversible. That is very dangerous. Hence, it cannot be addressed independently, and we have to look at the full life cycle. I hope I answered it.
Yeah. Anybody else wants to add their thoughts? So, my next question is like, we speak about materials. I think Pranati spoke a lot about, look at material first for the decarbonization. So today we see a lot of research happening in, bio-based materials and alternative building materials and all that. So do you think, or how far do you think these can be effectively, they can effectively replace cement and concrete completely? And given the large scale of production and a lot of construction that is happening in a lot of places, do you think bio-based materials can be a complete replacement to these? Or how to balance between the two, like, an intelligent balance between uh, concrete and the bio-based materials?
I think that's a great question. I began my story by saying, we're talking about decarbonization, we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about net zero, but the amount of steel and the amount of cement that's being used in buildings is only increasing with time. I'm talking specifically in context of India. I'm not going into the global story, and because every country has its own story and every development has its own story. But I think what is very interesting is that definitely the consumptions are only increasing because we are going with high rise, we are going with, the issues with development. The way development is happening is it's really something to ponder about sometimes. What is happening in our country, what is happening, the kind of so these are things that we are thinking about. Going to your question as to what is the future, or is that actually happening the way we envisage? I think we will need another a year or two to get, because I can actually honestly feel the impact of course going, and the one of the things that really works very well is, or one of the things that actually makes real estate developers think, is cost. So when these things or these impacts come big, they will definitely look at these solutions. So it's important to keep your solutions ready. It's important to keep your options ready in the market, because if you don't have the options, or if you don't have substitutes, you're not going to be able to work around it. So I think most importantly, have substitutes available, have the right building materials which can actually substitute steel and concrete, or at least reduce impact, available in the market. So that is the first step, which we are already there. Now, when we talk about substituting it in actual numbers, or actually seeing the impact, I think we are going to have a very big push to it, and actually seeing that one fine day you will just see the change, and that transition is yet to come, but I see it coming very soon in my entire thought process, or the way I've been studying this market in today's time and era.
Who else wants to add their inputs? Okay, so I move on to my next question. So my next question is to Architect Udit. So when we speak about carbon capture, so how do you think carbon capture? I think carbon capture is a lot talked about these days. So how do you think carbon capture is driving low carbon cement production in India? Do you think scaling up carbon capture can be very effective, to achieve a low carbon buildings? Is it a practical solution?
Thank you for the question. So, try to be a bit nuanced here. So cement production is responsible for about 8% globally of the CO2 that's the emissions that are. So now, when we're talking about this CO2, it's mainly coming from the calcination process. And in India, there are three major approaches that are coming out, at least emerging as of now. One is your carbon capture source, which is capturing the CO2 directly at the kiln exhaust. The second one is blended cements. This is reducing clinker content using fly ash, slag, etc. And then alternative fuels. So this is where we're looking at the heating. So biomass or waste-derived fuels when you're doing the heating process. So now carbon capture specifically targets process emissions, which are difficult to eliminate otherwise. Right. So now when we're talking about whether it can solve the problem, carbon capture is promising but it is energy intensive as well. It's also capital intensive, and currently, it's quite expensive when you're doing it at a large scale. So it addresses the emissions at the production stage, but it does not reduce your material consumption. And this is important. And from a building perspective, the most effective pathway is to create a hierarchy. So, first reduce your material demand through optimized structural design. Um, that's the first and most important one, where there's a lot of over design, a lot of excess cement that's used there. The second is to substitute. So using blended or low clinker materials, one can kind of substitute for the amount of cement that is coming into your demand. Uh, and then finally, a third aspect is improving the production process itself, and that's where carbon capture should come. So if we rely only on carbon capture, very simply, we're treating the symptom, but not the main core system itself. And yeah, I believe carbon capture will play a role in decarbonizing heavy industries like cement. But achieving low carbon buildings requires both supply side innovation and demand side intelligence. So the material efficiency, the structural optimization, design decisions that can reduce concrete in the first place, those are things that we should definitely look at.
Anyone else wants to add? Architect Santosh, your thoughts? Pranati, Anshu?
I think Udit actually put a very nice point out that, design plays a very important. Like, I was actually debating with a structural consultant on how we could, actually reduce the steel, in the structure. And that kind of thought process, of course, it's important to actually do it at the design stage. And I think that's very well curated as to why it is important to do it at the design stage and how you can actually reduce consumption substantially if you do it well in the beginning. And very often we overlook that because you're so involved in other things and nobody's there to deal with that. So I think that's very important also. And most of us overlook that.
Okay. Okay, now I have a question to all of them. When you speak about low carbon buildings in India, I think of late it has gone a lot of importance because people have really started realizing the harmful effects. So, what building codes are governing low carbon building construction in India? Do you think there are adequate codes and regulations, or what more should be brought into place currently? I think it's a question to all of you, and anybody can answer first. And I would like to have all your thoughts.
Uh, so regarding the codes, standards, I think yes, we have certain directions definitely sorted. The recent ECSBC that is formulated defines a lot of approach towards low carbon design. So, Anupama ji, we are talking of low carbon design and we are not talking of no carbon design. So, I think we have a lot to cross over. If we see various certification programs as well, they are following codes which are available in various standards, and that is how even if we are seeing the V5, that is version 5 of LEED that is coming up, so it has a separate credit which is focusing on carbon. If we are seeing other rating systems which are India based are also accepting life cycle analysis as one of the major aspects while doing their building. So yes, there is a lot of awareness already in the market, but along with that, a lot of ambiguity carries on, and still we have a long way to go, but at least we have started walking. I would submit that ways. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Dr. Anshul. Yes, Ms. Anupama, that's a nice question, but though there are some good work happening with respect to ECBC and BE, I hope, I think that we don't yet have a carbon code. Although there is this indirect push from the regulatory body on the companies through BRSR and as well as through foreign trade mechanisms. So that push is precisely hitting them. And when a company wants to reduce their emissions, the low hanging fruit for them is the building emissions, and they can work towards carbon modeling and things like that in material choices. Great if they could start with passive architectural aspects, but let's not get deep into that because there are some limitations. We have to understand that its businesses are predominantly corporate driven. We understand that they have some limitations over there, but there are some easy mechanisms where they could focus when it comes to carbon modeling. So all those things are happening, and of course, the rating systems are now coming with more stringent prerequisites and credits, focusing on the carbon aspects, not direct. I mean, not just on compatibility aspects as the previous versions. So all those good works are happening. I believe that it may take some more years for the nation to mature enough to come up with the carbon code, but I don't see that it is very far. We are already on the path, is what I feel.
Okay. Anyone else wants to add anything? Beat of
I
Yeah,
think, sorry, you're speaking with it?
go ahead, go.
I think this question is quite relevant, and I think कि see, India, or when you talk about codes, is anyways a long way behind other countries in terms of codes and compliance. So we have, a lot of codes we still follow international codes, and a lot of things so there are codes which need to be actually relevant to today's time. Like carbon code I don't think it exists, and as you mentioned, and these things have to definitely come into being. We all need to sit together and put these thoughts to in perception as people in the industry, and ensure that these are enforced in the system. These go through the compliance or become. I remember we've been talking about ECSBC for years together. What is the compliance? What is actually happening? What is So I think it's important they actually get executed, and it becomes an integral part of the development story of the country, without which these codes don't have any relevance. So I think it's very important that it gets integrated and imbibed as a culture of the country. So that's my thought on that.
Um, yeah, so my perspective is that I would say India has made significant progress in at least developing codes and frameworks. So ECBC, Konivas, Griha, some state level mandates. I think structurally the intent is there. But the challenge is not so much the absence of the codes, but more about enforcement or uniform adoption across all the states, or even the performance verification, which is something that's deeply lacking. I mean, once you do this, it kind of nobody goes back and sees whether things are actually performing the way it was promised. And there's also a split between tier one and tier two when it comes to codes. In tier one, compliance is getting better because of institutional developers, because of the ESG pressure that is been happening in the background. And in tier two and three, I think there's implementation capacity, awareness, and monitoring mechanisms that are still evolving. And so those are things that that's somewhere where these codes fail a little bit. But I think with some amount of rigor and with some amount of maybe learning from tier one enforcement, it could maybe strengthen in the next 5 to 10 years. And of course, I think also that most of the codes are still very energy centric. So, if we're serious about low carbon buildings, then embodied carbon and life cycle assessments need to become, mainstream regulations that we, do by default. And yes, so therefore, I think we have the frameworks, but stronger enforcement and, performance-based evaluation before and post construction, and yeah, carbon integrated codes. I think these are things that can really, I mean, there is space for these things to happen.
Great insights. Thank you. Santosh, you want to add anything?
No, I'm good. I think it's pretty well summarized.
So there's just two more questions that I had. One was, I think we were looking at retrofitting also. I think Anshu also mentioned one of her projects as a retrofitting project. So do you think retrofitting is it can be a very powerful tool when we speak about reducing emissions? Because I think not all buildings can be rebuilt or something like that. So what are your thoughts on retrofitting, or how effective would retrofitting be for residential sector?
So you're talking about specifically residential sector?
Cover everything, but I just thought because residential was more, you can please speak about all the sectors.
So retrofitting, as per my perspective, would be is difficult in residential, and however, so the energy guzzlers are the commercial buildings. And that's where adoption of retrofitting happens more easily. They look at actually implementing retrofitting, and it's possible. And a lot of buildings are actually going in for retrofitting and working around their buildings for better efficiency, because energy consumptions are going up by the day, and I think that's very important to understand. However, for residential buildings, it's not that easy. So that's my take on it.
Anyone else? Any thoughts on this?
So I would just add on this part that retrofit is necessary only when we realize that the building is not performing to its original or optimum level. If it is already going good, probably no point, revisiting it. So as I think Udit mentioned, that performance check and even commissioning for that matter is a must, and it has to be done at periodic intervals. So we have commissioning plan also. If those are working well, probably no point revisiting the project. But yes, when the life cycle of that project is over, no point going and retrofitting it, but redeveloping it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any take on the large scale infrastructure? Carbon emissions related to large scale infrastructure, at the construction stage, or how it can be controlled? Because we usually limit ourselves to, not we, basically, like when we speak about residential, commercial. So because a lot of roads, bridges, and other mega structures that are getting developed. So what do you think about that? Yeah.
So decarbonizing infrastructure requires a systems approach, reducing the material intensity with smarter design and optimized structural systems. We're actually doing a ropeway project where we're kind of looking at how it's a new technology. At the same time, we're trying to decarbonize and bring it to as low emissions as possible. And we see that transition to low carbon materials like blended cement or recycled steel are things that can make an impact. And third is also to electrify the construction process and integrate renewable energy then to take care of that electrical load. Is one big one in terms of infra projects. The same renewable can then be used for operational consumption afterwards. But plugging it into the construction process is something that can really bring down construction carbon. And finally, the design infrastructure for durability and resilience, making it for a longer lifespan directly reduces your life cycle carbon. So making the infra, whatever this infra project is that one's working on, to ensure that the long-term durability is in place and is taken into account, so that over the life cycle, you're able to bring it up. So it's design, materials, and the energy aspects working together. I think these are the three aspects I can think of which are directly applicable for infra projects.
Thank you for that. One last question. What do you think are the barriers to adopting low carbon construction in urban centers, in India particularly?
So when we talk about barriers, the first and the foremost barrier comes is the cost and the economics related to all these strategies. This is a mindset, and unless and until we do a detailed analysis and we come up with the right option, because we always talk about return on investments. So we need to start talking about the first costs now. And if we are realizing that we can achieve some impact with neutral costs, probably, yes, that will make a difference. Till then, this will remain as a barrier. Thank you.